Dzień za dniem, noc za nocą, nasze życie upływa pod bezkresnym niebem. Marzymy o rzeczach wielkich, ale życzymy sobie rzeczy prostych. Myślami wybiegamy do przodu, ale jesteśmy świadomi, że życie toczy się tu i teraz. Spoglądamy w niebo z dobrego miejsca na ziemi.
Kujawsko-Pomorska e-Szkoła, witajcie uczniowie, witajcie nasi widzowie. Przed nami lekcja języka angielskiego, którą poprowadzi dla Was pan Grzegorz Fidala. Jest już w naszym studio. Dzień dobry, witamy.
Hello, good morning everyone, good morning students, good morning teachers and parents. Today our lesson will be about the cinema. The title of the lesson is Let's Go to the Movies, and this very name can be a little bit surprising for you because it doesn't say let's go to the cinema. Why do we say, can we say let's go to the movies? Yes, we can, because this phrase is the most popular phrase used in the United States of America in American English. And a few lessons ago we had some words about differences between British and American English. So today I decided to give this lesson a title in American English just for you to know that actually filmmaking industry is the biggest and strongest in the United States. So in this lesson we are going to learn a couple of things about, first of all, the history of cinema, so how, where it all started and where it all developed later. Then we will discover different types of films and the whole filmmaking process. How does it happen from the start, from the screenplay, until the film is released and you are able to watch it in the cinema. We will go through the whole process with filming, after filming, and then finally we'll talk about a couple of people, important people in the filmmaking industry, and revise the film vocabulary. So, let's start. Let's go to the cinema. Right now, because of the pandemic, it is possible again to go to the cinemas, of course with some limitations, and of course the cinemas and their programs are not so full of hits and new releases. They are all waiting until it will be safe enough. So that is why the biggest expected hits for this year, like new James Bond movie, Wonder Woman, the Minions, for example, for kids, has been postponed until later, until autumn, or even until next year, like in the case of the Minions movie. All right, but let's start from the beginning, how it all started. Well, actually, the very word cinema comes from cinematography, which in French stands for moving pictures, motion pictures, because this is what film was all about. The invention of a camera, which was possible to make still photos, happened in the 19th century. But of course, it was not enough for inventors, for people with huge imagination. So they wanted to create a machine which will allow everyone to watch on the screen events and people like in real life. And the first successful attempt of a public screening, of a public show, czyli transmisji publicznej, with paid tickets happened and was made by two French brothers. Their names were Louis and Auguste Lumière. They were inventors, and in the year 1985 they created the cinematograph. The cinematograph was something in the type of a projector, something that we can now name as a projector, and the first film they showed to the public were the laborers coming out of the factory. It wasn't very long, and it wasn't similar to the films that we watch right now in the cinemas, because it took about 4 or 5 minutes, but at that time at the end of the 19th century, it was a real sensation and a great shock for everybody in France, because it happened in France, in Paris. The next screening that they create for the public was about the train which was coming into the station. Another very short film, but it was so realistic for people attending the show, attending the screening, that many of them went into panic and started running away from the show. So the beginnings of the cinema and the beginnings of public showing were not very easy. But after this first public screening, it all went really quickly and spread around many countries in the world. In Britain and in the United States especially, started appearing places for people to watch, and more people started to create films. And that was the beginning where it was only possible to record films without any sound. That first period of the cinema is called a silent period or silent era, which means that from the end of the 19th century until about 1930s, most people were black and white, of course, and what is more important, they were shown without any sound, without any dialogues or conversations, but just the moving pictures. To make it more interesting, some cinema makers, some filmmakers, and the owners of public cinemas decided to actually employ live musicians who were sitting next to the screen and playing music on the piano to make it more enjoyable, to make it more entertaining for the people in the show. Now, to make it easier for people to understand what is happening in the pictures, and to make it possible to use some kind of conversations and dialogues between the heroes of the film, the makers of the film decided to use something called intertitles. Intertitles were pieces of black screen with words, with dialogues shown between the scenes. So there was, for example, one actor on one side moving his mouth, then we could see the intertitle, the page with intertitle, and then the camera was turning to another person. It was also the beginning where some special effects started to appear, and films were becoming more and more spectacular. And one of the most famous films of that time was The Trip to the Moon, based on the book of Julius Verne, and was realized by Georges Méliès, so another French author, another French director, so director, a person who is responsible for the creation of the film. And here you can see a fragment, the most recognizable part from the movie, when the rocket from Earth is reaching the moon and actually hitting the moon in the eye. So the moon was a little bit personified. If you think that it is the beginning of the 20th century, it was a really groundbreaking special effect. Of course, it's completely different from what we can see in the cinemas right now, but then it was a real sensation again. Now, filmmakers were becoming more and more precise and more sophisticated in the process of making films, and they tried very hard to give people a real experience. That was the time when the first sound films started to appear. And 1927 was the year when the first sound film entered the cinemas. It happened in the United States. The title of the film was The Jazz Singer, and it told the story of a musician living in America. So no wonder that a film about a musician should have elements of music inside. It was possible due to development in technology and the possibility of recording the picture and the voice at the same time. Now, it wouldn't be possible without the creation of big film studios. So places where it was possible to get the actors, get the specialists from scenography, directors in one place, and they all started to go to the dreamland of filmmakers around the world, even now, which is called Hollywood. Hollywood used to be just a part of Los Angeles, a big city in the West United States, the west coast of the United States, in California, but it became the central point of a filmmaking industry. And big studios created by Samuel Goldwyn, William Fox, Louis Mayer, or the Warner Brothers started appearing one next to another, and they started the race about creating the most popular, the most entertaining films for the audiences. Now, one interesting fact about it is that many of those people have Polish origins. For example, Warner Brothers, there were 4 of them, they were born in Poland. Well, it wasn't Poland at that time, because when they were born, Poland was not on the map, but they were of Polish origin, their parents were Polish, they emigrated to the United States, and there they created their famous film studio, which is making big hits until even now. Because right now, if you think about Hollywood, if you think about the most important film studios, Warner Bros. Will come to your mind for sure, Disney, Marvel, which is responsible for hits and blockbusters, czyli takie najpopularniejsze hity kinowe dla masowej publiczności. So blockbusters like The Avengers and all the comic book adaptations, they are all made in the United States. Pixar, responsible also for greatest animations of all time. Now you can watch one of the Pixar films in the cinemas as well. It's great. I was there. I was in the cinema a couple of days ago, and I do recommend it. So, there are also some nice films to watch even now. An important part of filmmaking industry is also the prizes, because when more and more producers and more authors started making the films, they decided that there should be some special competition. And that is how, and that is why the Oscars, which you may all know as the most important prizes in the filmmaking industry, appeared for the first time in 1929. So it's been more than 90 years now, since the first prize was given at a private lunch at a party of not many people, but it grew very much until now, which is a really big event, the biggest event. It usually takes place in February. And what is important for us, for Polish people, is that very often, especially in the last few years, it happens that a Polish filmmaker, author or actor is nominated. So in 2015, Polish director Paweł Pawlikowski and his film Ida received the prize for the best foreign film, najlepszy film nieanglojęzyczny. And 4 years later, he was nominated again in 2019 for his film Cold War. He was nominated in 2 categories, so not only as the best foreign films, but also as the best director. And the very next year, so last year, we were also really surprised and satisfied that Polish film was nominated for that prize, because a film by Polish actor Jan Komasa, Boże Ciało, Corpus Christi, was also nominated, which means he got into a short list, into a group of 5 or 6 titles which could receive the prize. It didn't get it, but still the nomination is a huge honor for the makers, and it also means big money, because when a film is nominated for the prize, it is shown in many more countries, and people just want to watch because they believe it is a good film. All right. Now, how does it happen, and what do we have to do in English if we want to see a film? First of all, let's go to the cinema and let's suggest it. So right now we will go into this process of going to the cinema. And to go to the cinema, to suggest it to our friends or family, you can say two phrases. Let's go to the cinema, and this is the phrase that we would use if we used British English in most European countries. But, just like I told you at the beginning of the lesson, in America, in American English, we can say, let's go to the movies, because the movies is an American equivalent of the cinema. Another phrase you can see, which means the same, the building where films are shown, is a theater, a film theater, a movie theater. That is why when you watch trailers, czyli zapowiedzi następnych filmów, które ukażą się wkrótce, you can see in the screen at the end, in theaters, for example, in September 2020, which means it's going to get into the cinemas at that time. Now, other ways to suggest going to the cinema, other ways of suggesting anything could be, would you like to go to the cinema? Or how about going to the cinema? And pay attention to the change, the grammatical change. After would you like, we use the infinitive. Would you like to go? After how about, we use the gerund. So we say, how about going to the cinema? But that's not everything we can say. We can also suggest going to the cinema by saying, hey, why don't we go to the cinema? A może byśmy tak poszli do kina? And the final phrase that you can use, hey, what's playing at the cinema this weekend? Co grają? Co jest wyświetlane w kinach w ten weekend? Or, to put it short, and again we reach out for the American English, what's on? Which means, co leci, what's on the cinema right now? So remember about this difference, that in American English we would say the movies or movie theater. In British English we would say the cinemas, or the phrase you all know and you've heard for sure, because of the fact that in our cities we have the Cinema City, which is a popular chain of multiplexes, so big cinemas with a lot of rooms to watch. All right. Again, when we want to go to the cinema, and whenever there is a new film, we use a specific phrase to say that film jest wyświetlany lub film jest puszczany. So we say that a movie is released, which means wchodzi na ekrany. The new James Bond movie will be released this autumn. It was supposed to be released in the spring, but of course, due to COVID pandemic, the premiere was postponed until November. But this is one of the highest expected and most expected films this year. Another phrase we can use to say that a movie will appear in the screens is a movie opens. So Spielberg's new movie opens in theaters next week. We can translate as nowy film Spielberga wchodzi do kin w przyszłym tygodniu. Będzie wyświetlany na ekranach w przyszłym tygodniu. So you can use these two phrases to speak about a start, a first showing and first screening of the film in the cinemas. Let's move on. Before we go to the cinema, when we want to see a movie, first what we have to do is we need to find out where a specific movie is playing, especially if, like in many big cities, there are more than one cinema around. So you first check where the film you want to see is playing, then you look for the movie show times, which means godziny projekcji, godziny wyświetlania, and you choose a screening. A screening stands for pokaz. When you already chose the show times and screening, you want to make sure that a film is really worth watching. Maybe you just saw the title, maybe somebody recommended it to you, but if you want to make sure that it's good, you can read reviews. Reviews, czyli recenzje, to find out what other people think of the movie, what other people say. And unfortunately, I made this mistake that I went to the cinema last week without checking the reviews, and the film was so terribly boring that I almost fell asleep and I wanted to leave before it finished. So do read film reviews before you go, not to be disappointed. Now, When it comes to types of films, many of you know them because you watch a lot of films, both in the cinemas or on TV, but just to mention a few very popular categories. First of all, a historical film. In Poland, there are many historical films created, and they make them every single year. Another very popular category, to which, for example, James Bond series belong, is action films. So films with shooting, police, superheroes, and so on and so forth. Another very popular type of a film is a comedy, which is pure entertainment, a film to make you laugh, a film to have fun. If you like having fun in a different way, perhaps you want to go to see a horror film, which is a scary story about some unnatural events, vampires, witches, blood, etc., etc., etc. Of course, we don't recommend horrors to viewers who are below 15 or below 18. Now, perhaps you like also science fiction films. So series like Star Wars, films happening in the outer space with rockets, with unnatural matters again. They belong to the category of science fiction, or to put it short, sci-fi. In recent years, there was also the rise in musicals. So films in which actors sing and dance became really popular, with an example that you see on the screen called Mamma Mia, based on ABBA songs. Of course, the films which are most popular with younger audiences and with younger kids are animated films. But I'm not saying they are not for everybody, because even adults like watching them from time to time, and they can be really good, getting Oscars, not only for the precision in animation, but also for great stories. And the last category that I wanted to use here, which is also very popular and very entertaining, is a romantic comedy. Sorry, or a rom-com, as we put it in short. Of course, there are many other categories like dramas, like documentaries, but these that I selected are probably the most popular and shown most often in our cinemas. And if we think about the filmmaking process, so if you want to know how does it happen that the film is made and it appears, it gets into screen and is in front of you, the first thing we need is an idea. And the idea is born in the head of a screenplay writer or a script writer, which is a script. In Polish, we say scenariusz. So first we have a story which is usually written. Sometimes it's also based on some popular books. Then we need a person who will read the script, decide that they have an idea how to put it into the screen, and this person is a director. A director needs to organize cast. Cast in Polish is obsada. So starting from the most important actors, the frontline actors, the most important celebrities who appear on the screen, until the extras to będą statyści. We have the cast, so a group of people who are responsible for appearing in the screen and for acting the story out. The film is made on a movie set. A movie set is a place where a film is created. Right now in Kujawsko-Pomorskie we are having one film made in Nieszawa. Wojciech Smarzowski, a very popular Polish director, is actually making his new film, and the movie set is located in the center of the city. Plan filmowy. Then, for the film director to create a film, he needs to have people to work with. A crew, ekipa filmowa, these are people responsible for all the small details, for costumes, for characterization, for scenography, for every single fact to make sure that, for example, an actor playing a person from ancient times doesn't wear a watch, for example, on his wrist when making a movie. And finally, a modern film wouldn't be interesting without music. And the music from a film, all the songs and all the melodies which you can hear during a film is called a soundtrack, which in Polish we translate into ścieżka dźwiękowa. All right, so here you have a collection, a so-called word cloud of most important words connected with types of films, people who appear in films, character, a villain, a film, show, a hero, adventure, celebrities, etc., etc., just to sum up all the things I said so far, but this is not the end, because when the film was made on the film set, it doesn't go immediately to the screens, but it needs to go through the process of editing, which means putting the scenes all together, cutting out the scenes which were not so good, not so interesting, and finally, the result of this process is the so-called final cut, czyli ostateczna wersja, which will be shown in the cinemas or in theaters. Sometimes there are two different versions of the same film which can, for example, finish in a different way. One important example of that type, a film which you will be able to see next year, is the story of Batman and Superman, The Dawn of Justice. It was in the cinemas about 2 years ago, but the final cut was different from the vision of the director. That is why he decided to create something called the director's cut, wersja reżyserska, in which the story can finish in a totally different way than the way you saw in the cinemas before. And before the movie opens, before it is shown in the screens, there must be a massive promotion period. So it's shown with trailers before screenings of other films. We can see posters, and actors give press conferences in which they speak about what was it like to play the role, what was it like to become the hero, just to get to the members of the public and just to make more interest for you to be wanting to watch that film. And now it's time for you to just choose the film, choose the screening time, just like we said, talk to your friends, suggest going to the cinema, and don't forget your popcorn. That's all for today. The sources I used for pictures shown in this presentation, in this lesson, come from many different sources, from Wikipedia in the first place, and some specific entries about the history of cinema. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this lesson made you want to go to the cinema soon, perhaps next weekend, which is the last weekend of your holidays. That's all from me today. Thank you very much.